Look, I get it. We've all had the classic pre-packaged green bean casserole countless times over the years, but I wanted to make a completely from scratch version and compare the two in a side-by-side taste test to see, is the extra time actually worth it? Let's break it down.
Specifically, I wanted to see if we can make a version where most of the components are made and stored ahead of time, so it's still less than 45 minutes worth of work on actual Thanksgiving, and hopefully the beans have some texture and color, the mushroom sauce actually tastes like some mushrooms are in there, and you can still douse it in as many fried onions as you'd like before comparing the two side by side to see if that extra time is worth it. Now, today's very special Thanksgiving episode is sponsored by OnePlus, the premium Android smartphone manufacturer, and their motto is to never settle. So whether that's with your smartphone or your Thanksgiving side dishes this year, we should all expect more. So let's see what we can do with this from scratch green bean casserole. So the beauty of the prepackaged version is that you just kind of slop everything into a baking dish and call it a day. So I try to stay close to that process, and the three components that are going to be prepped ahead of time are the blanched beans, the mushroom vegetarian demi-glace, and of course the fried onions. And these should be prepped one day ahead of time, so then that's all that's left to do on Thanksgiving is just make a quick mushroom cream sauce with that demi, and away we go. Let's start easy with the green beans. So obviously we're gonna go with the fresh ones, so just chop the ends off and then into the desired length, and I like making these roughly about 1 inch long. Then you're gonna bring a pot of water to a boil and a large 4-finger pinch of salt, and additionally you wanna have an ice bowl ready at the side. Now dump the green beans into the boiling water and just set a timer for 2 minutes. This blanching process is gonna stop enzyme reactions, or simply put, lock in the color, flavor, and texture of the green beans. Once the timer is up, immediately toss them into the ice water and just let them cool for about 5 minutes. Once the green beans have cooled, strain them off, and then you're just going to toss these onto a cookie sheet evenly spaced out so they don't stick to each other, and then toss the entire thing into the freezer for at least an hour so they're solid. Then just pull them out and toss them in a container or a freezer bag, and you have some beautiful green beans ready for a moment's notice. Okay, so that was simple enough, but now it's on to the mushroom demi-glace. So the mushroom cream sauce is primarily broth and half, but instead of making the whole sauce and freezing it, it can get a little weird taste and texture wise, so we are just going to make the broth, and specifically, this is a mushroom-based vegetarian demi-glace. It provides roasted vegetable flavor and tons of umami, and whereas animal-based ones can take 24 hours or more, this comes together in about 3, plus you can store the extra in ice cubes for sauces at a moment's notice. Now, I followed the basic process outlined by the folks over at Chef Steps with just a deviation or two, so let's go. First, preheat the oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit, and then let's get to our vegetables. So the basic process here is to cut all these very thin using a knife or a mandolin, and you could really use any vegetables you want. Just make sure not to use too many sweet vegetables, as this could make the demi overly sweet. And if this looks like a lot of vegetables, it is, but don't worry, this will cook down a lot and leave us with a bunch of roasted vegetable flavor to extract. Once all the veggies are chopped, optionally you can break up a sheet of kombu, which will provide umami, and then you can add about 30 grams of tomato paste and give a nice drizzle of olive oil over the top before roughly mixing everything together. Then just toss this entire thing in the oven to roast for about 2 hours or so. And you'll want to check it every 30 minutes or so and just toss the vegetables. And the goal here is really to brown and mostly dehydrate them so we can concentrate that flavor in a broth and then reduce it way down. This is what they should look like after about 2 hours. It may take more or less time depending on your oven. Just make sure they don't burn. Now add the brown vegetables to a stock pot and pour in 2.5 liters or about 10 cups of water. And then once the water is added, just slide this whole thing back into the oven for 45 minutes, and this will leach the flavors from the vegetables into our water. After 45 minutes, you just want to transfer the stock to a container, try not to spill it, and then strain it out back into the pot so we have liquid only. Now you're going to want to note the amount of liquid with a wooden spoon here, and the goal is to reduce this by about half or maybe even a little more. So just let this sit over medium heat, stirring it occasionally until that liquid has evaporated, leaving us with a highly concentrated vegetable stock. Now while that's reducing, this demi has 0 seasoning, so we need to add 4 grams of salt, 3 grams of MSG, and then optionally you can add a thickener. So animal-based demis break collagen to gelatin, but veggies alone aren't going to give you any gelatin, so unflavored gelatin can be used to thicken it, or you can use pectin if you do want to keep this sauce vegan. I chose to use pectin, so just add 4 grams of the stuff to the bowl. Once the demi has been reduced by about half, I like to transfer it to a smaller pot, and now for the last 10 minutes or so, add a couple of dried porcini mushrooms, which is just going to give us some more mushroom forward flavor. Then lastly, you're going to add a couple spoonfuls of the liquid to the salt, MSG, and pectin mixture and just mix that up into a paste so it doesn't clump up by just dumping it straight in. So you want to whisk in that mixture until it completely dissolves, and there you have a mushroom-forward vegetarian demi-glace. As always, taste it and adjust the salt levels as needed, and you can always add more pectin or gelatin to give it more body if you want to. To store these, just pour the demi out into a couple of ice cube trays, and these can now be used at a moment's notice for a beautiful pan sauce. The day of the casserole, we're just going to grab out 250 grams worth of these cubes, and we are good to go. But lastly, let's make those fried onions. For the crispy onion topping, we're keeping it fairly simple to maximize that oniony flavor, and these things are very addictive. I could not stop snacking on them. So to start, set a wok over medium-high heat and add about an inch or two of peanut oil up the pan. We're going to bring that to 325 degrees Fahrenheit, but while that heats up, thinly slice one whole onion from pole to pole, and you want to keep them fairly thin so they brown up a bit faster while they're being fried. Once sliced, I set them on a paper towel and kind of squish them around a bit to soak up some of that excess moisture. Then you're going to add the onions to a bowl or large container and sprinkle about 50 grams of cornstarch over the onions, and this is going to help create some extra surface area for that hot oil to crisp up and brown. Once the oil is at the requisite 325 degrees Fahrenheit, just toss in the onions and fry them until they become golden brown, and you want to be moving these around constantly. Now, for one whole onion, I did these in 2 batches, and you'll definitely want to be monitoring these and making sure they don't burn or else they will become bitter. Once they have just started to brown up nicely, transfer the fried onions to a wire rack over a baking sheet and make sure you hit them with a nice pinch of salt and mix that in together. As the onions dry, they should become nice and crispy, a little bit sweet and salty, and these things are oh so good. Again, I just couldn't stop eating them. Now, instead of storing these in the fridge where they'll go limp, you can either store them in an airtight container at room temp for a couple of days, or what I do is throw the entire sheet tray in the freezer for about 1 hour. Any water will turn to ice crystals, and then you can just transfer them to a container to keep in the freezer at a moment's notice, and these things actually crisp up really nicely straight from frozen in the oven. Now, with all the work done ahead of time, the day of takes roughly 20 minutes of active time before baking. So to start, preheat the oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and then set a cast iron over medium-low heat and add a tablespoon of butter. Once that's melted, just toss in about 80 grams of shiitake or button mushrooms, along with a pinch of salt and 20 cranks of black pepper. Now just cook the mushrooms until they are brown and have given off most of their liquid. Next, you're going to toss in 2 cloves of minced garlic, the 2nd tablespoon of butter, and also in about 25 grams of flour, and just let everything cook while stirring for about 1 minute. Add a splash of wine for a bit of acidity and let that cook off. Then add the 250 grams of the mushroom demi-glace and bring that to a simmer and cook for about 2 minutes while stirring, and this will start to thicken up very nicely. Next, add 400 grams of half and half and bring that all back to a simmer. Now, while stirring, we're going to let this reduce until it has thickened quite a bit, and this is probably going to take at least 10 minutes. Once thickened, you have one of the most delicious mushroom sauces, so all that's left to do is add in the frozen and blanched beans, along with a handful or 2 of the fried onions, and just mix everything together. Now, I like to let this come back up to heat for about 2 to 3 minutes, and you can obviously just keep this in the cast iron if you want to, but I prefer to transfer this over to a baking dish, and you're going to toss this on with as many fried onions as you want over the top. Then just slide the whole baking dish into the oven to bake for about 10 or 15 minutes until the sauce is bubbling around the edges and those fried onions get back to crisp. Now, there's one last thing to do, and that is see how it stacks up to the old standby prepackaged version. But before we do, quick word from today's sponsor, OnePlus. Today, I use the OnePlus 9 Pro, their flagship Android smartphone, to document my green bean casserole, which will be featured along their Never Settle side dishes this holiday season. And prior to getting the OnePlus 9 Pro, my phone was from like 2017, so it was either take a bad photo or bust out my bigger camera, which is kind of annoying to do while filming, but that is no longer. The OnePlus 9 Pro camera technology was co-developed with Hasselblad, bringing clear and accurate photos to users. So now I can quickly flip out my phone to document a crisp photo without having to disrupt my filming workflow. And if you want to learn more about OnePlus and the phones, including the fastest charging in North America, visit the link in my description to see my recipe along with the other Never Settle side dishes this Thanksgiving. Thank you again, OnePlus. But now, let's taste test.
All right, everybody, so I have both here, and this is the best time of the video because it's really fun to actually taste test things side by side like this because you really start to pick up on those flavors and differences in textures and things. So let's dive in. I have the prepackaged one here on my right. Let's go. All right, so I'm not gonna play it up for the camera. This one is just flat out better overall. However, there's one component that I might change a little bit. So let's kind of go through them. First of all, we start with the beans. So this is the one thing that I kind of changed. I kind of like the soggy beans of this one. They don't taste as good as like the fresh blanched ones, but there's something about like just a completely soft green bean that, I don't know, it just like hits some kind of X factor that I can't really explain, but I kind of like the soggy bean. The other components, though, not good. Like, this doesn't really taste like anything. If you actually taste these onions, like, just straight up, they don't actually taste like crispy onions. They just taste like crispy nothing, whereas the onions on this actually taste like onions. They're a little bit salty, too, nice and crunchy, and it actually tastes like onions. They're unbelievable. But the thing that makes the biggest difference between these two is the sauce. This mushroom sauce is absolutely unbelievable. It actually tastes like there's some mushrooms in there. It's creamy, it's umami. This cream mushroom soup, like, it doesn't really taste like anything. If you actually taste these side by side, it's just like, this is kind of just like salty, plain salty. It doesn't really taste like anything. This actually tastes like onions. It actually tastes like green beans. It actually tastes like mushroom cream sauce. So is it worth it? I totally think it is, especially if you make the components ahead of time. It's really not that much work on Thanksgiving Day, and you can have all this stuff ready in your freezer at a moment's notice. I highly recommend at least doing the sauce, getting those demi cubes and tossing them in there. You guys are in for a treat, but hopefully you guys have enjoyed the video. Yeah, if you want to try something new for your green bean casserole this Thanksgiving, I would highly, highly recommend. Thanks again to OnePlus for sponsoring this video. The recipe for this will be up on the landing page link down below. But it's gonna wrap it up for me in this one. Hope you guys have a good Thanksgiving. Peace, y'all.
The mushroom sauce, whatever you want to call it, is just to die for. And the onions too, like these